Rob Sampson is one of those rare people who believes in the American system of government and holds true to it. That is the founder's vision of a small government, a liberty-based system. Rob, welcome back. Nice to have you here.
Glad to join you, Todd.
You've been working for several weeks, and you're about at the midway point, I believe, in the legislative session. That right?
Yeah, this is really, I refer to this point in the session as the lull. You know, it's the calm before the storm. You start the session, with the individual lawmakers putting their bill requests in, and then we have our public hearing period, and then there's the committee process, and then there's this little dead zone kind of in the middle, and that's where we are now. And we will start going into session in the House and Senate over the next several weeks, and it starts off gradually, maybe just Wednesday, and then Wednesday, Thursday, and then it's Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then it's every day, all night.
So what is it structurally that's different now that you're done with the committee hearings and it's just about you guys going through all the pieces of legislation as a full body?
That's correct, yes.
And what is... what's the update? What are the horrible pieces of legislation that they've decided not to continue with, and what are the horrible ones they plan to pass? Do you know yet?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, it's hard to know exactly what is going to make it from the bills passed out of committee to a debate on the floor and ultimately into law. These committees, they pass far more laws bills than they could ever actually debate and vote on for the full legislature. Just as an example, the Housing Committee last year, they passed one bill into law. And then this year, I became the ranking member of that committee. And I think we have somewhere between 75 and 80 bills that passed out of committee that are going to be sitting on the House and Senate calendar waiting for debate.
Now, why
Who knows
is that?
Which ones they will choose?
Are they doing that so that nobody in the legislature knows which ones they'll be voting on?
In some respects, yeah. Well, in part, it's because they want to make sure that everybody, at least in the majority, gets their say and gets their bill advanced at least part of the way. And they want to have a choice on what to do going forward. And I think, the Democrats are always testing the waters to see just how far they can push certain things. So you'll see a lot of bills year after year that might not go all the way, but they try and bring them up anyway, just to get us used to these things.
Right.
Just one thing comes to mind, which is the constitutional amendment protecting abortion up to birth. That is something that passed out of the committee last year, and it never went any further. 3 days in a row, I was told that it was going to be debated in the Senate. Of course, I'm the ranking member of that committee, so I'd be charged with getting up to debate that bill, and it didn't happen for 3 days.
So they want you wasting your time prepping on that bill, is that it, to weaken you on other stuff?
Yeah, it's either they were trying to waste my time or they wanted to go for it and decided that it wasn't worth wasting their time listening to me. Who knows exactly what
they would
is
never,
the ultimate decision.
They would never want to do that, would they? Why would that be in their best interest to pass something like that?
For that particular proposal?
Well, the idea of having abortion, protecting abortion rights till birth, isn't that the kind of thing that would be self-destructive for the Democrats to pass?
I believe so. I think it would damage their party and their agenda. In fact, there are a number of bills that passed out of that committee this year that I think are extremely dangerous to Democrats. They have bills suggesting that inmates should be allowed to vote, lowering the voting age to 16, allowing illegal immigrants to vote, for example. I think that these bills, if they were to pass them, they would lose votes over that type of agenda. But that doesn't mean they don't want these things, Todd. They do want these things.
Yes, I get you on that. It's just that the abortion one would cause... Abortion's an interesting topic because it's maybe 35, 35, 35 where people are at on it. Like 35% are halfway in each court, or 50% of the people have a foot on each side of the question. They might lean strongly on one side, but a lot of people who are pro-life do believe that there are certain circumstances where abortion should be allowed, and a lot of people who are pro-choice do believe that there are circumstances where it shouldn't be. So there's an inherent conflict there that is covered up by presenting it in a binary and getting people in a binary mode. So they would be hurt by creating that kind of absolute bill because they wouldn't get all the Democrats on board.
I couldn't agree more. And maybe that's why they haven't been able to move that agenda item. Mm-hmm. But the question opens up so many different avenues to take this conversation down. I mean, I will tell you one thing, which is that when we had that bill for the public hearing, I was extremely amazed and even more disappointed that there was only a handful of people came to testify in opposition to it. I mean, it really shocked me.
You're talking about last year, that abortion bill?
No, it happened just this year, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Oh, okay, this year. That abortion bill you're talking about.
Right, and hardly anybody showed up. And of course, the Democrats are trying to do it in a very dishonest and disingenuous way. They've titled the bill a constitutional amendment protecting privacy. Mm-hmm. And then if you read through the bill language, they include reproductive freedom as part of the terminology for privacy. And then they further redefine reproductive freedom means abortion without any interference at all. In fact, they use the line from the Second Amendment, shall not be infringed. So it's pretty shocking and broad-based kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But there were very few people in opposition. And I'm very concerned, Todd. I think we've seen less opposition this year to legislation at the state capitol, the really crazy stuff especially.
Well, but isn't that because they play this game of flooding the marketplace with proposals, and so that the opposition can't really get organized around anything in particular because there's too much going on. I know that I haven't been marketed to on much. People haven't come to me and said we have to talk about this on the air.
Right. I mean, that's all true. And the Democrats are amazing at their ability to keep what's actually going on hidden from view, and often until after it passes, because no one really knows what's going on. I mean, the time frames that they have to provide notice for meetings, I mean, they have to provide only the day before at 6 p.m. is when the agenda comes out for a meeting where bills will be voted on the following day. I mean, who has the time to react to that? As a member of the minority, I mean, I have to use that 6 p.m. until 9 a.m. the next day, even staying up all night sometimes to prep for these bills. Mm-hmm. I would love to be using that time to rally the troops and get people to get engaged and help push back on these things.
Well, part of the problem of being an opposition party that's at a low level of power inside the chamber is that there really isn't much machinery in place to mobilize. So there should be a separate infrastructure that provides that mobilization, and it just doesn't seem to exist.
Right. And, earlier this year, I had come on a couple of times and tried to give a heads up about some bills for hearings that were coming. Mm-hmm. And I did that as much as possible, and I did that on my own through social media and through, email and that sort of thing. But it's a very difficult thing to do because the schedules change on a moment's notice. The majority is very clever about how they rearrange things. I joke with people all the time that, the committee process doesn't even do anything anymore. All we do is pass titles out of committee because it almost...
They're empty legislation without the words in there yet.
Right, yes. Or they have plenty of words, but it doesn't matter because there'll be different words on the day that we actually vote on it. It'll be brought up to the floor of the Senate, and the very first thing that will be said is that they have a strike all amendment. They're going to strike every bit of the underlying bill and replace it with something else. And sometimes it's just a matter of moving things around creatively just to make it harder for the opposition to even debate the bill, which I've seen happen. But often they put in there what they originally intended to put in all along and just never told anyone.
In the old days of when there was media that played a significant role in our politics, it was different, I think, because the media would be appalled at this kind of conduct. And it's been stripped down so much now. I feel like there's nobody sounding the alarm. You need Paul Revere riding in the middle of the night to get everybody mobilized. And that's what the media used to do. And we don't have that anymore. So the Democrats have figured out how to make sure they can conduct themselves in the most malicious way possible and have nobody talking about it because there is nobody to really mobilize some alert system.
Right. I couldn't agree more. I mean, it is the job of a nonpartisan fact-based news media to get upset about the process, if nothing else. But they don't. And in fact, many of the news media outlets in this state are completely in the tank for the Democrats. And sadly, the Republicans, each of us, and I'm not going after my Republican colleagues, but we're all incredibly busy. It's so hard to be able to handle all the things that are flying at you on a day-to-day basis, to also add to your plate the idea that you've got to get out there and be actively promoting to the public what's going on. And we've been successful when we've been able to do that. Tolls was a big example a couple of years ago where we got some media attention. We got you and other folks on the radio helping. And that was a case where we were able to actually stop some bad policy because it was simple. People could get their head wrapped around it, and it was a non-starter, and we were able to prevent it.
But, that tolls thing might have been an alert to the Democrats, that because the reason they stumbled there is because Ned just made that his issue for his first year in office, and it represented a betrayal of his statements when he was running for office. So he orchestrated his own moves in such a way as to mobilize as much response as possible. But maybe they've taken a lesson from that, and they've become way more conniving in the way they propose things.
Well, they're definitely more and more conniving by the day. And sadly, most politics today is wrapped up in, various topics that are, we can't talk about. They wrap almost every debate in race or, respecting LGBTQ rights or something like that. And sadly, very few people, even though they might internally oppose this type of legislation, are afraid to speak up because they don't want to be categorized a certain way. They don't want to be maligned or accused of being a racist or something like that. And there are many of these bills going through the legislature. Mm-hmm. Most of these bills are about creating special rights. And, if you have the nerve to stand up and say, wait, we shouldn't have special rights for certain groups of people. We should have equal rights and equal application of the law to everyone. Suddenly you're a target because you opened your mouth and you dared to defy the new order of, equity and transgender rights and things like that. It's a scary world to be involved in politics.
I'm sure it is. It's a scary world in general to just be alive, because of the way politics is being played in this country right now, how malicious it is and how destructive it is. So the job of leaders in the House and Senate of both parties is to mobilize some kind of messaging that offers protection for the range of positions that their members might take. And I feel like that's kind of collapsed for Republicans in the state as well.
Right. The Republican leadership in Connecticut is only interested in talking about fiscal issues. They clam up at the first word that we're going to start discussing anything on a social issue, category. And as a result, we're losing all those battles because no one's making the argument.
You lost before before they're waged. Hang on one sec. Rob Sampson is here, state senator from Wolcott. We'll continue on WTIC. Rob Sampson, even though the news isn't all good, the news about Rob and the way he reports it is good because it's straight up the middle and factual, and the questions get answered. Do you notice that Rob doesn't sound like a politician? He sounds like a person when he speaks. State senator from Wolcott still. Thank you for doing it, Rob.
Well, it's my pleasure. At least the opportunities I get to talk to you and your listeners, that's my pleasure. Sometimes
no, seriously,
Hartford is not so fun.
Seriously, I ask a question and I keep waiting for you to demur, and you just say, "Yep, that's it. That's it exactly." So it's very refreshing. So what's the message you want to get out right now?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm more concerned about our state and our country than I've ever been. I really am, Todd. Every day I watch the news and I see the left getting bolder and bolder, and fewer people on the side of traditional American, politics, freedom, love of, individual rights, civil rights. They're just not speaking up anymore, and people are being silenced out of fear of being mischaracterized. What's funny, I don't know if you reported on the events that happened in Tennessee following the shooting out there, where you had a transgender assailant murder 6 people in a Christian school. And there was huge rallies at the Tennessee state capitol, and several Democrat lawmakers decided that they wanted to be the spokespeople, really, for that movement, that gun control movement, and they interrupted a legislative proceeding. Right.
Oh, the Friday events you're talking about. Yeah, that was pretty wild.
Right. I followed this very closely, but I got to tell you, the last few days I've been watching the reporting on it, and it is almost all characterized as if these individual 2 Democrat lawmakers, because they're African American, that somehow that they were singled out and that they are being expelled, and the whole thing is an issue of race. And I got to tell you, I watched the whole thing from beginning to end, and I did not get that at all. What they did was wrong. I can tell you that if I got up in the middle of any hearing room or on the floor of the Senate when I was not supposed to be, recognized, and grabbed a bullhorn and interrupted the proceedings and started hanging up signs and rallying, people to interrupt the day's events, I would certainly expect to be in a lot of trouble and potentially expelled from the chamber. And that's exactly what happened there.
Isn't it funny, by the way, that they happen to have the bullhorns handy?
Right.
I mean, it was clearly a planned event. So the only, the thing I think is important about it is how stupid the Republicans were to fall into the trap, because it was a setup the whole time. We only have 30 seconds, Rob, so close us up with whatever you wish.
Sure. I would just suggest that we've got to be more vigilant as time goes on, and certainly I thank you for all of the effort that you put on the air trying to warn the people of Connecticut about what's happening in our state government. And I'll keep doing my best to come on and tell you about the policies that are coming and so forth. But we've got to remain vigilant, because the Democrats, they're bolder than ever. And unless we stand up and make our voices heard, I'm afraid we're going to lose this state. We're balkanizing into blue and red states, and I think that I don't want Connecticut to be one of the first ones to fall into no retrieval territory.
It's at a very scary point. Rob Sampson, thank you, sir. Check him out on Facebook or wherever. Rob Sampson, state senator from Wolcott. We're going to the BPS Lawyers Track.